Welcome to Healthy and Active in the Couve. I am Nick Medlock. I am a certified personal trainer through NASA and also a certified nutrition coach. And I work with the people here at Northwest Personal Training. It's a great business. We have all kinds of events that we can lead you to. If you're interested, we can leave links down there. And my co-host with me, as always, is Dr. Trent Corey, a physical therapist. And today we want to talk about meniscal tears. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of them. We're going to talk about like what is the meniscus in case you don't know, and then is it basically is it a death sentence, so to speak, for your knee? I like the thought of why cut something if you can untie it. So maybe talk about as a last resort for surgery. Some things that cause the meniscal tears and things that you can do to kind of make it not hurt so much, and then when to see a physical therapist and a doctor. So this is more of Trent's field as far as the physical therapy and everything. So I'm going to let you take it away, Trent.
All right, thanks, Nick. Yeah, it's there's a lot to unpack there, but basically, a lot of people will say that they have, pain in that joint line area, right? It's kind of like right in through here, right? And then maybe a little bit towards the front. Could also be lateral, but a lot of times it's medial, right? It's kind of right in here, and they're right in that joint spot. Sometimes it's that MCL area, but sometimes along that area, that's where you feel it. People will complain of it maybe even locking or catching, or sometimes just pain with just any sort of movement, or also pain with just like sitting too long and you try to stand up and all of a sudden, oh man, that hurts, or just feels like it gives way. Those kind of things are kind of indicative of those kind of those tears in the meniscus. And I don't have my model with me. I'm at home today. But basically, the meniscus is this connective tissue, it's fibrocartilage that sits on the top of your tibia bone. And that's where the condyles of the femur, those knobs at the end of the bone, I usually use my knuckle to kind of use that analogy. But basically, those condyles of the femur kind of go in there, and there's a little bit of rotation in there as the knee flexes and extends. And so we'll do different tests to kind of check and see if it's likely a meniscus area. Big one is called the Thessaly test, which is like you're basically standing and you're standing and then you're going to bend your knee and then you're going to kind of rotate each direction. Okay. And we'll do different tests as well on the table. But basically, any sort of like load bearing with some rotation will give some indicative, like, hey, there might be something going on there in the knee related to the meniscus. And you said something about a death sentence. Well, I kind of use the sense people will say, well, I got maybe I have this tear in my meniscus, or they've already had the MRI and it shows different things in there about the meniscus. Like there might be a term called a bucket handle tear.
Yeah.
That's basically where part of that kind of flaps over, and so it kind of leaves a little flap that's open. Sometimes there's just a radial tear. It just kind of goes, like straight in, like one, and that's kind of just, I'm not using my fingers to describe this, but basically, a tear like, kind of like that, right? So it just kind of flaps like that. So it's not too bad. What happens with a tear is, a lot of times there'll be little disconnects and then the joint can't really articulate that well with that load bearing and rotation. So it can be uncomfortable, of course, but then also the ability for that tissue to repair itself depends on the vascularity, right? So like depending on where that tissue got torn, how much does blood flow contribute to its ability to actually heal and repair itself? And then some places where it's actually really a big chunk is off and then it's locking and causing, like I said at the beginning, if it's locking and giving way, those things are a little more of a dangerous thing because, you could be just walking down the stairs and all of a sudden your knee just, you really don't have that feeling. I mean, obviously we want to be strong and work on these things, but sometimes it just kind of unexpectedly gives way. And that's when we want to have a little bit more diagnostics, or maybe kind of consider some options in the future. But there are so many better options now for healing than there ever have been. So I love to just kind of tell people it's not like a thing where you have to go straight to surgery.
Yeah.
We can screen these things, and if they look really nasty in the clinic, right? If I see somebody and they have like, oh, I think I have a torn meniscus, and let's say they haven't had imaging yet, well, I could still look at them and kind of say, well, let's see all your basic functions and see what you got going on. And then, yeah, if it's like really hot and bothered, there might be something where I say, you need to go to ortho, and this looks pretty rough. But most of the time, there's so many different things we can do now to help prepare, help your body's own innate healing capacity, and ways to support how your knee needs to function. Working on those support structures. Your muscles in your quads. You got your tibialis muscle. We've talked about the knees over toes. We walked about a little bit. All those supportive structures are like your shock absorbers, right? So the more you can kind of take load off the knee, we can definitely decrease the ability for that compression to happen. And that way you can have more support for the knee. And no matter what down the road, you need that anyway, right? So it's definitely the first avenue to definitely get you stronger and more mobile through that. A lot of times people are tight. That's causing more compression in that area. We can definitely look at all sorts of things. I'm sure you might be able to talk about nutrition, how that affects, just inflammatory condition. Sometimes we just irritate something, and anytime you just get a cut on your hand or whatever, it flares up, or you bump it really hard or whatever, it flares up, it gets red, right? It needs to heal. And sometimes we got to get through that phase of healing, and then we can feel much better, even with a tear. So it's pretty fascinating. So yeah, there's a lot to that, but generally there's things we can look at, why things are going certain ways, work on exercises to kind of find the right slot for you to be working in that's not too overloading and painful, but also challenging enough to get your neuromusculature kind of firing right. So you're not having, you're having a better reaction, and your body's able to walk and run or whatever you want to do over that in a progressive fashion. So.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Something that I keep hearing in my head that you said earlier is depending on the blood flow, the meniscus can heal itself.
Yeah.
So what would be ways that we can get more vascularity, more blood flow into those tissues?
Well, a lot of times, there's not, like, if it's in avascular tissue, the best way is through movement, right? So the more you get your body flushing and going through that, it's like a little sponge, and it kind of absorbs, and the waste products leave when you compress it and you flex and extend your knee. And also just the appropriate amount of load bearing. So you're trying to do it the right amount. There's folks who will do now like blood flow restriction, where you can do less load on the joint, but now you're loading up those muscles, so you can get those muscles stronger. But the key is the kind of the Goldilocks zone of that load bearing, and getting your muscles to kind of kick on and work a lot more efficiently will help facilitate that process to happen. But sometimes, if you look at your cartilage at the end of your bone, like, chicken bone, let's say, you chew it up, some parts, it's just going to be hard to like have that go together. Right. So there are irregularities in our tissues. Our bodies are made to remodel the best it knows how. Right. And so sometimes they're not a perfect game. Like, the body doesn't completely get it perfect, but it does a really wonderful job.
Yeah.
And so if the joints are just a little bit off, just because we had a minor tear or even a more significant tear, if we address all those inflammatory parts, and that's why I'm big on the soft wave. I've seen people with meniscus tears get a lot better with those kind of things, because we're helping the body's own stem cells kind of migrate to that area and help that kind of re-adhere to each other the best it can. What happens is, if you're feeling better and we can get you moving and we can get you loaded more, your body can then adapt to having less less meniscus, or if you have a little tear in there. So my point is, like, even if you tear things, you can actually manage it pretty well non-surgically. And I also want to point out the study that was done by Mosley in Waco in kind of back in the early 2000s, I think, about placebo surgeries.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating stuff where they had people with meniscus tears in one group. They told them they're going to be in one group, the surgical group or the non-surgical group. So the surgical group was going to actually get a meniscectomy. That means they actually, there's a part that's kind of flapping around and not really part of it. They'll clean it up, they say, right? They'll cut that away. And that was the standard practice, and still is in many places. Repairs are happening more and more where they can actually. I'm doing this. I don't know what the exact. They do a lot of the stitching up together and kind of help that get together. But then, but in the study, they had one group of folks do the meniscectomy, and the other group basically just got a little cut in their skin, and then they do what's called the lavage. And all that was is just washing the joint out with water, made it look like they had a surgery. And those groups were statistically insignificant a year out. So they were both better, but like there was no major difference between the two groups,
Wow.
which shows, either the power of placebo, which is probably part of what, a lot of the mind body folks would talk about. And it's still very important. Like, hey, if you believe you had a surgery, and you believed you had something done that was helpful for you, does that help you get better? That's a kind of a whole other topic, maybe. But basically, it was kind of neat to see that people who didn't even have the procedure did just as well. So that's super important to realize. And you think about it, if you're opening up your joint, you're actually opening up your joint to oxidation and a lot more chances for you to have some sort of arthritic condition later on in life. So we want to decrease those inflammatory agents, but also the oxidation of the joint. When you open up when you cut into, you think about it, the synovial fluid is inside this capsule inside your joint. And then when you cut it open, it basically opens up the balloon to the world. And so it actually, there's like this negative pressure that creates this, floating phenomenon, basically the hydraulics, right? It just kind of gives you the distance between there. So you have the synovial fluid that's like, the coefficient of friction is like ice on ice with a layer of water in between. It's so slick, right? But also the hydraulic kind of creates some spacing in there. But when you cut things open, you basically pop the balloon, and so you don't have as much ability for that. So that can lead to more breakdown later, not less. So when we talk about surgery, and like if it's a significant thing, a lot of times that needs to happen. But then I'm kind of like, that's the last of last choices. We don't have to go there if not possible. So when I see folks and it's not too severe, sometimes we want to hit the panic button, but can we do things to just calm down the healing, get the healing response to activate as best we can with tools that I have now, the soft wave, and then I do red light therapy with folks. People are feeling better, and if they're getting better and they're moving well, they're usually pretty happy, and then we can kind of progress them along on a path that, hey, is it a little achy here and there? Yeah, but like, is it something that we need to, go under the knife for? Almost never. I don't say never, but like, a lot of times we can get things moving quite a bit better. And then if things are, if it kind of doesn't respond very well, it usually shows up. Like it's just not turning much, and then we know that there's some other further intervention to do. But generally, most people are going to do pretty well with the things that we have at our disposal here in the clinic. So it works. Not here in the clinic. I'm not in my clinic right now, but like, yeah, you get the idea. But it does help, to get on top of these things through more conservative methods first. So, got all sorts of tools for that. Runners and all sorts of active folks, people doing triathlons and all that stuff. We can definitely get to the point where you can be much more functional.
Awesome. So there is hope.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think that's a thing. Because I've met a couple folks who just say, well, I've gotten the MRI and I have this really bad severe tear in my meniscus. They pretty much said, when do you want to do the surgery? And I don't want to do it. And if they haven't gone down the path of like the things that, some people have done the, PRP, or they've maybe even tried stem cell injections. These are options that are less invasive. But completely non-invasive is some things like the red light therapy and the soft wave technology we have that actually stimulates your own body stem cells. Get that going first, and then looking at the major movement patterns that you have lost. No matter what, even if you have to go down the road towards, let's say, a knee replacement down the road, you want to look at these things first. You want to get these things moving well. And so no matter what, we got to look at that first. And we see changes in folks a lot. So it's something where if you look into it, and you follow like people that I've seen, and they've told me how they've come along. It's kind of fun to see that improvement, and that we don't have to be like, oh, this is just something I have to accept, and especially with me in PT world, a lot of PTs. Let's say this. Let's say if you have a joint deformity, right? Something in your joint got busted, right? A lot of
Mhm.
people will say, well, what's therapy going to do, right? Like, I'm just like, what's a bunch of exercises, to get my quads stronger going to really help me, right? Like, because my joint's still going to be the problem, right? But a lot of times, with the other things that I have at my disposal to help improve cellular healing, we can get some more traction towards that now. So the joint actually is healing while we do movement. So then the movement becomes that much more effective. Like you said, hey, movement is kind of how we circulate the joint and get
Right.
things moving. Now we can get as much as we can to that process to improve the cellular healing processes in that area. And then we can get that moving better. And so, it's a good potent combination. But yeah, I mean, if you just go to a traditional PT place, and I'm definitely not the traditional PT place, that, if you're just going in and just doing light leg presses and some leg extensions and some quad hamstring, I'm not knocking all that. It doesn't mean you can't get better, and people do actually. But a lot of times there might be some parts of it that you're not getting quite all the way through, and that's why I've set up my clinic this way. So these really active people really want to take advantage of the technology and the 21st century of healing. That's why I've set up my model this way, so people can come in and get that help.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm a big advocate too, depending on the situation, if you do have to go into surgery, to prehab before surgery so that all of your movement patterns are getting stronger, because the atrophy that happens by just being weaker while you're doing that, you want to set your hips up so that you're in balance, or as much as you can be, because that limp is going to really knock your hips off, which knocks your ankles and all the other joints all the way down the system. So you want to make sure your body is in line and tuned up with itself before you have to go into a surgery.
Yep, absolutely. You need to be as strong as possible. The stronger you can get, and the better you can get movement wise, the better your outcomes will be post surgeries for sure. So no matter what, I mean, we're kind of getting the point is like exercise and movement is going to be the biggest thing to really make sure we emphasize. And it's really just, really hitting those quads and also hamstrings. We talk about the soleus a lot, getting all these muscles working well, because they all impair how we load the joint during the gait cycle. And so kind of progressing that as much as possible is going to create the best outcome no matter what. So, so people say, we can go through this course of rehab, and they say, oh, I've done therapy and it didn't work. Well, at least the things that we do, and you keep consistent with those, they're going to serve you well no matter what happens. And so just taking with that attitude and like, saying, well, maybe, I don't promise to move. And I say, hey, this could be a thing where you might actually need to go get surgery no matter what. But with the process that we're doing in therapy, I'm setting you up so you will have the best outcome no matter what decision happens later on, if this thing doesn't, completely turn a lot, because some things actually do need the surgical procedure, but we're finding that we can help more people than we used to. And so that's encouraging to me, that I can save some folks from going unnecessarily under the knife, and all the cost and the difficulties that go with that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's always something that happens either way, whether you have to go through surgery or not. But I've seen so many surgeries turn out as full body issues, especially with crutches and things like that. So, like I said, why cut when you can untie? But sometimes you do need to cut. But
Yeah.
like you said, movement, motion is lotion's my favorite mantra.
I love
So,
it.
yeah.
Good.
Well, fantastic. Is there anything coming up in your world?
So yeah, I mean, I basically have been doing some events for my Softwave machine. I know I keep talking about it. It is fantastic technology. I've been doing some events on weekends now. So one called Softwave Sunday. We had some people just try it out for a really good price. Absolutely free. Just trying it out, just to have people come in for 15 minutes and try it. I did a few of them with good success. I'll probably do some more here in the fall coming up. We'll look into some chi running classes. I'm really busy with cross country for Skyview High School. I got to meet today, and so we're kind of working through the end of October into November, and then I'll probably set up my fall and winter schedule to kind of work on kind of this restorative winter type idea, getting people where they get to the end of their seasons or their fall marathons. Can we get stronger, or at least get you rehabbed in a way that sets you up for success for the spring? So be on the lookout for that.
Awesome. Well, cool. And then for Northwest Personal Training, if you're on YouTube, I'll send a link. But most of the time on Facebook, I'll attach a link to all the upcoming new things. So keep in mind for that. And if you don't see that, you can leave a comment and I'll get right back to you. But thank you, Trent. That was very informative. And I love talking about all of these things. So we'll have a fun new talk coming up soon. So everybody keep a lookout for that.
All right, Nick, thanks so much, as always. All right, take care.